All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today we are going... Excuse me. We are going to be diving into the Tal'Dorei Reborn subclasses. Now, due to how popular my Tal'Dorei Reborn video has been compared to all of my other videos, there's a good chance that there are going to be some new people that are showing up here. So I just want to kind of preface this with what is this show about. D&D Deep Dive is literally... just me looking at options and trying to kind of let people know all the different ways that you could use those options to do the things that you want to do. I am a huge believer in the idea that in an RPG is significantly more important for you to have a character you're excited to play than it is for you to have a character that is mechanically the best it can possibly be, or that fits into a certain role or any other thing like that. So the entire point of the D&D Deep Dive is to show you all the different ways you can use some of these abilities. So if you do go, you know what, I want to be a Juggernaut Barbarian, but it's a weaker subclass, or, you know, it doesn't fit with the rest of the party. It doesn't matter. I'm going to show you how many different ways you can use it so that you can get the most out of the choices that you make. Make the choices you want, then watch this show to figure out how to still feel like a badass and still have the rest of the party happy that you made those choices. But don't worry about making choices based on what you think is going to be the best. Make the choice about the things that you're most excited about. So, that being said, if you do like this stuff, standard YouTube stuff, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon and to turn notifications on. All of those things mean other people see this as well. That being said, let's dive into this. So, today we are going to be covering the Juggernaut Barbarian. Now, I mentioned in my review, there were, I believe it was 4 subclasses in the original Tal'Dorei campaign setting, which looks a lot like this. And Path of the Juggernaut was in the original Tal'Dorei campaign setting. It looks a lot like this. So, and I even think I've covered this before, but looking through the Juggernaut Barbarian, I realized there was enough changes that I can justify making another complete video about this, because this Juggernaut Barbarian is going to play a lot differently than the original one, and I gotta say, I like this one better. So, let's actually dive into this. First things first, a quick reminder about how 5th edition class design works. In 5th edition, every class is designed to play very, very differently right from the beginning. In order to do that, they have these things that we call defining features. Defining features are either things that are unique to the class itself, or maybe they're not unique, but the class gets them earlier than other classes, or they can use them in different ways than other classes. And for something to be considered a defining feature, it needs to show up within the first 2 levels. So, what are the defining features of the Barbarian? Well, the 2 really big defining features, there's a couple things that the Barbarian gets that are kind of unique to it, but the 2 really big defining features are Rage and Reckless Attack. And both of them have multiple uses that a lot of people seem to kind of forget. That leads into how the Barbarian is meant to be played. Rage is the most known Barbarian ability. Basically, it's a bonus action. You rage and you get extra damage to attacks, and you take less damage effectively from physical attacks, and depending on your subclass, that might include the amount of damage that you gain resistance to. Rage itself gives you basically 2 things. One, It exemplifies the Barbarian's ability to just do lots of damage. That is one of the things that Barbarian does very, very well, is it does lots of damage, and it does lots of damage remarkably fast. Rage helps in that. In addition to that, Rage also makes the Barbarian take less damage. One of the things the Barbarian excels at is the fact that the Barbarian gets more hit points than any other class in the game. They have the highest hit die of any other class. Constitution is one of their attributes that they need for the class itself, for other features of the class. So they tend to have a high Constitution, meaning they have high hit points, and they take half damage effectively from most physical attacks. Barbarians actually affect the action economy, something we talk about a lot in this, by simply making themselves better targets and taking attacks that would normally hurt their friends. Any physical attack that hits a Barbarian instead of even just a fighter, who is also designed to be a little bit tankier, or a paladin, is going to be less effective against the Barbarian because it literally does half damage. And that's where our second ability comes in. Second defining feature of the Barbarian is Reckless Attack. Reckless Attack, most people only think of it as an offensive move. Basically, you activate it, all your attacks on your turn have advantage, but all attacks against you have advantage as well until the start of your next turn. So a lot of people see that as, well, there's a benefit, but then there's a bad part to it. It's not how it works. Yes, the advantage on your attacks is super useful, especially since Barbarians are built to be crit machines. So getting advantage on your attacks means you are that much more likely to crit, and when a Barbarian crits, bad things happen. There is a reason why the Half-Orc Barbarian is really popular. The Half-Orc gets a racial ability that allows them to roll an additional damage die on a crit, and Barbarians get an ability called Brutal Critical at the 9th level, where they get to roll additional damage dies on a crit. Barbarians are crit machines. So for that aspect, Reckless Attack, really good. However, I mentioned before, Barbarians have a little bit of action economy control in them, in the fact that they make themselves to be very nice looking to the targets. They don't wear armor. They use unarmored defense. So your regular enemy that's not thinking too much is going to look at them and go, oh, look, easy target. The smart enemies, when they start recklessly attacking, are going to go, ooh, look, it's much easier to hit that person than it is going to be to hit that fighter over there. I'm going to go ahead and attack them. And that means, again, as long as it's physical attacks, those attacks are going to be doing less damage. And even ones that they don't have resistance to from their rage, again, they have more hit points than any other class, so they can take the damage when other party members can't. So Reckless Attack has two different really useful abilities. One is it makes the Barbarian do more damage, and that's what everyone looks at. The other is it lets the Barbarian take attacks for their allies. And the Barbarian is built around giving damage out and taking damage. Rage ends if you don't take damage and don't make an attack. So you need to be getting hit a lot, and you need to be attacking things a lot. So how does the Path of the Juggernaut fit with those defining features? Well, let's dive into it. Excuse me for just 1 second. By the way, if my voice sounds low, it's because it is a little low. I literally just rolled out of bed because sleep schedules my brain doesn't like. The pitch will raise as the video goes on. It's just how my voice works. So, at 3rd level, you get Thunderous Blows. When you hit a creature with a melee attack while you're raging, you can push that creature up to 5 feet away from you in a direction of your choice. A creature that is huge or larger makes a strength saving throw with a DC equal to 8 plus proficiency plus strength. On a success, the creature's not pushed. So, Thunderous Blows was an ability of the original Path of the Juggernaut, but there's a slight difference. The original one had the identifier once per turn. So it was, you could only do it one time. And Barbarians from 5th level on actually get 2 attacks. And Barbarians can actually dual wield as well without too much difficulty. It doesn't work quite as well with their Brutal Critical because dual wielded weapons are going to have smaller damage dice than two-handed weapons. But when you look at the fact that they're getting all those extra attacks, it kind of balances out a little bit. You can play a dual wielding barbarian and have a really, really formidable barbarian. And with Thunderous Blows, this one specifically says when you hit a creature with a melee attack while you're raging. It does not mention once per turn or anything like that. So Thunderous Blows in the first one was kind of interesting, but it was very limited. You could only move a single creature up to 5 feet per turn. With this version of Thunderous Blows, if you're dual wielding, you can technically move a creature up to 15 feet. And unless they are huge or larger, they just move. They don't get a chance to resist it. Whereas the original one, anyone that got hit by it would have a strength saving throw. So it's significantly less useful in a number of ways. This, again, turns the Path of the Juggernaut Barbarian a little bit more into a control style class. If you're not familiar with the term control, in 4th edition, which everybody hates, and there's no reason to, is really, really awesome. A lot of the best things from 5th edition came from 4th edition. And I have videos on that, so you can watch that. But they had different roles. They had defenders, which are basically your tanks, effectively. They had strikers, who their main goal was to do damage. You had leaders who were able to heal, and you had controllers who were able to control the battlefield. I am a huge fan of control-based classes because they're not something that's really prevalent in 5th edition, or at least they weren't when 5th edition first launched. Now you're starting to see a lot more control-based classes, and this one's really fun. If you could control where the enemies are, you get a massive advantage in combat, especially when you combine this with other abilities. Things like if one of your allies has the ability to fear someone, by using your movement to move the creature into a place where either it can't run and therefore just has to sit there and take the dodge action if it's been feared through. So this is something like Turn Undead or something like that, or just by putting them in a place where there is no possible way that they can break line of sight with their fear target, you have just made sure that all of their attacks will be made with disadvantage. Moving creatures into a choke point and then having your barbarian just stand there defiantly means that all the enemies really only have the choice of attacking your barbarian, and the rest of your party can just take pot shots while they're there. There are so many advantages to being able to move around your enemies, including lining them up for spellcasting. You know, I mentioned quite a few times, Fireball tends to be a lot more useful than Lightning Bolt, because Fireball is a circle, Lightning Bolt is a line, and getting more than 2 people in a line is remarkably difficult in 5th edition. It doesn't really happen much. Barbarian can make that happen, so you can Lightning Bolt 4 or 5 dudes, and with how long Lightning Bolt is, if you have enough kind of control people on the board where they can line up 6 or 7 people, you can get a lot of use out of a Lightning Bolt, or even just pushing people together to get them in Fireball formation. So yeah, the ability to, especially once you hit level 5, get move either one target 10 feet or 2 target 5 feet, or if you're dual wielding, moving 15 feet or, some combination of 15 feet is really, really good. Also, if you're playing near anything with edges or cliffs or anything, it is super, super fun to knock someone off. Even if it's only a 10-foot drop, if you knock someone off of a cliff and they fall and they have to take falling damage, it's a really fun experience. If you knock them off a 200-foot cliff and they fall to their death, like my first D&D Adventures League character, then for the people that did it was super fun. For me, it was less so. But yeah, so Thunderous Blows, Really good. I like the changes that they made to it. Oh, and I missed a part of it because it's on the next page. Starting at 10th level, you can push a creature up to 10 feet when you hit it with a melee attack while you're raging. So, even more usefulness. I do want to mention two words that are really, really important in this. Can and up to. Or technically it's three words, but two phrases. Can means you don't have to do it every time. If we're talking about that example where you have someone at the edge of a platform and if you push them, they're going to fall, get your first two attacks in, and then your third one, push them over if you want all your damage against that thing. Again, when it goes up to 10 feet, you can push them up to 10 feet. So if you don't want to push them 10 feet, you don't have to. You're still only going to make one move per attack. So if you only push them 5 feet, you don't get another 5 feet later on unless you hit them with another attack. So, all right. Also at 3rd level, you get Spirit of the Mountain. When you're raging, you can't be knocked prone or moved along the ground against your will. This is effectively the same thing of Stance of the Mountain, which is what the original one had. And it's still kind of nice. I'm generally not a huge fan of giving too many abilities per level. A lot of times, if you see us as a subclass that gives you like 2, 3, or sometimes even 4 abilities at 3rd level, what it is that was actually a full class that they just couldn't come up with enough abilities to turn into a full class. So they turned it into a subclass to try and just modify something to play extremely differently, and that never works. Because it doesn't interact with the defining features and things like that. So this is a kind of minor secondary feature you get at the 3rd level, and it's a good one. Again, being able to resist being moved is useful. Enemies using forced movement happens. It's not an uncommon thing, but it's also not a super common thing either. However, the knocked prone thing, that is really, really useful for a number of reasons. First things first, being knocked prone means all of your attacks have disadvantage, and all melee attacks against you have advantage. So that can be a huge thing. Combine that with the fact that getting up from being prone requires you to use half your movement speed. Now, barbarians actually do get a thing at 5th level called fast movement, where they are what I call hypermobile, meaning they can move a lot more. They effectively can keep pace with monks, which are the fastest class in 5th edition. For base speed, once monks start using crazy monk shit, they're much faster than barbarians. But I'm slightly biased because I am a monk. I love playing monks. But being able to not have to waste half your movement, which when you're something like hyper mobile, like a barbarian, means you actually use more movement than other classes to stand up, because it always takes half your movement. So if your movement is 50 feet, it takes 25 feet for you to stand up. So things like that are really useful, and they are linked to raging. So again, this all is basically an upgrade to the rage ability. Which is what you want to see with a subclass. You want to see them upgrading the defining features or interacting some way with the defining features of the class. So, yeah. Moving on. At 6th level, you get Demolishing Might. Your melee weapon attacks deal an extra 1d8 damage to constructs and deal we'll try this again. Double damage to objects and structures. Demolishing Might is remarkably similar to how it was in the original Tal'Dorei campaign setting. The big difference is in the original, they just said that they had the siege property. Most people don't know what the siege property is. It's not really used that much in 5th edition at all. It was something that showed up in a couple magic items in the DMG, and that was it. So it's just reworded to make it easier to read. If you look at the original one, it is a much longer description for something that does exactly the same. And 5th edition itself is built around the idea of, if you have to put additional steps into do the exact same thing, then you've done something wrong. 5th edition is about getting rid of complexity for complexity's sake, and only having enough complexity as is necessary for you to have more options. And so this just kind of fits there. And it's a really simple thing. One of the things that's kind of interesting that a lot of people don't think about, constructs are not a super, super common monster type. Compared to things like undead and just the fact that there's tons of different kinds of monsters, constructs are not super, super common, but they do share things that tend to be kind of annoying for a lot of things. Specifically, constructs tend to be immune to stuns, or at least monsters that are immune to stun tend to be constructs. Not all constructs are immune to stun, but constructs and objects in general tend to be the things that are immune to stun. So if something is immune to a stun, it's probably going to be a construct or not an object. Why does that matter? Because stun, despite the fact that it's not a defining quote-unquote feature of the monk, is per the creators of 5th edition, it is supposed to be something that is definitive of the monk. It is something supposed to be kind of exclusive to the monk and is a huge part of their kit. So having creatures that are immune to stun really hurts the monk, because you're taking away one of the definitive aspects of the monk, which is its control ability, its ability to control the action economy. Having things that are specifically better at hurting constructs is really, really nice, because the monk can go deal with something else, or anyone else that's really kind of based a little more about control can go work on something else. And then the barbarian can just go up and go and just demolish constructs. And the ability to go through walls and things like that is kind of nice to do. I played a totem barbarian in a D&D Adventures League game, and there was one section of this adventure where we're trapped in a tavern that's on fire, and we have to try and get as many people out as possible. And I turn to the dungeon master and I go and get, because they made us check our weapons, I go and get Lucille. I had named all my weapons. And he goes, okay, what are you going to do with it? I said, I'm going to make my own door. He goes, what? I said, I want to go through one of the walls. Okay, make a roll, and I'm going to rage, because I'm mad at the fire. Okay. Make a athletics check with advantage, because rage does that. And I got a really high score. He's like, you made your own door. I know that adventure. I've run that adventure. There's nothing in the adventure about creating your own door. But I did, and I had fun. And we got everybody out of there without any problems. So, yes, do not undervalue the fact that you can break things. Creating your own door is one of my favorite things I've ever done as a barbarian, and Demolishing Might means you are particularly good at construction. Specifically the construction that involves making your own doorways and openings and other things like that. So yeah. That being said, moving on. Also at 6th level, you get Resolute Stance. Now this is a new thing that didn't exist in the original Kuka class. At the start of your turn, no action required, you can assume a defensive stance that lasts until the start of your next turn. While in this stance, you can't be grappled, attack rolls against you have disadvantage, and your weapon attacks are made with a disadvantage. So, Resolute Stance, when I first read this, I went, oh, they don't understand how barbarians work. And then I read a little bit more, and I went, ooh, they understand exactly how barbarians work, especially a barbarian that can push people around. So, with Resolute Stance, remember I talked about, hey, one of the things you can do is you can push all the enemies into a choke point and make it so they can only attack you. Well, now with Resolute Stance, not only can they only attack you, but now all of their attacks will have disadvantage. Now, there's the downside of your attacks will have disadvantage as well, but the benefit that you'll get, because you, at most, if you are a dual-wielding barbarian, which again is not common, but I think this subclass specifically benefits a lot from dual wielding. Even if you are a dual wielding barbarian, you are having disadvantage on 3 of your attacks. Whereas if there's only 3 enemies there, which is not a ton to push through a choke point, and each one of them has multi-attack, which is 6th level, they probably do at least 2 attacks. That is 6 attacks that you have just made significantly less useful in the action economy in general. We talk about action economy a lot. Basically, in 5th edition combat balancing, whichever side has more actions, more things that they can do, has an advantage in the fight. Always. That's always how it is. Even if the actions themselves are really, really weak, they only do a d4 of damage or something like that, there is still an advantage to just physically having more actions that you can do. And actions include actions, bonus actions, movements, and reactions. Anything that you can do is considered an action. So, Resolute Stance is, again, a really good kind of control mechanic, and it does give you a choice. Because you already have something that makes you a significantly nicer target if you need to ask enemies to attack you. However, if you're in a situation where enemies have no choice but to attack you, you might want to go Resolute Stance to kind of give your allies a little bit of a breather while you just take a bunch of attacks. Or you may want to just go full on Reckless and go to town on them. I will mention, if you combine Resolute Stance and Reckless Attack, you make both abilities pointless. Because if you have both advantage and disadvantage on something, you have just straight rolls. The one time that wouldn't be quote-unquote pointless is if something else was already giving something either advantage or did a disadvantage and you just wanted to get rid of that so that it was always being straight rolls. Yeah, there are a few instances where that is a useful thing. Like, rogues can't get their sneak attack if they have disadvantage, so it's significantly more useful for them to even just have a straight roll that they might miss than having a roll with disadvantage that they might hit on, if that makes sense. So, yes. At 10th level, you get Hurricane Strike. And this actually replaces Overwhelming Cleave from the original one. In 3rd edition, which translated into Pathfinder 1st edition as well, there is a feat you could take called Cleave, and then there was another feat you could take called Improved Cleave. Basically what it was, and every Barbarian in 3rd edition had this feat. This was kind of essential to being a Barbarian. It's one of the reasons why I often highlight 3rd edition and Pathfinder as not actually having more choices, just having to make more choices to get not having more choices, but having to take extra step to make the same choice. And that was because, yes, there was tons and tons and tons of different feats and quote-unquote customization options, but so many of them had prerequisites and were really tailored to specific classes that it didn't matter that you had a lot of choices. If you wanted to play the class correctly, the way it was designed to be played, you kind of had to choose certain feats. And Improved Cleave and Cleave was one of them. Basically what it was when you killed a creature, you could immediately make another attack. And one of the things that if you did with just Cleave, you could do that once. With Improved Cleave, you could just keep going as long as you kept killing things. And so Barbarians specifically would go into a group of really kind of squishy enemies and would just go bop, 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 and could kill 6 of them in a single round. That's effectively what Overwhelming Cleave was trying to imitate, was basically giving you the ability to make another attack. But again, it was translating a 3rd edition ability into 5th edition, and the systems are different enough that it didn't work very well, so they changed it into Hurricane Strike, which I like a lot better. So what is Hurricane Strike? Well, as a reaction, when you push a creature at least 5 feet, you can then leap into an unoccupied space next to the creature. If you do so, the creature must succeed on a strength save, DC equal to 8 plus proficiency plus strength, or be knocked prone. The leap costs no movement and does not provoke opportunity attacks. Additionally, whenever you push a creature into a space within 5 feet of one of your allies, the ally can use its reaction to make a melee weapon attack against that creature. So there's a lot to what seems like a relatively simple ability. First things first, whenever you push a creature at least 5 feet, that is specifically kind of targeting Thunderous Blows, because Thunderous Blows is built around the idea of being able to move things. So Hurricane Strike piggybacks with Thunderous Blows really, really well, and I like to see that. I like to see that this 3rd level ability is effectively getting an upgrade it to the 10th level that allows you to do more things. It does use your reaction, but Barbarians don't have a ton of use for their reaction. Basically, the only use they tend to have is for opportunity attacks, which again, for Barbarians, really, really useful. But in 5th edition, you just don't make opportunity attacks that often. You really don't. Unless your party understands the system well enough to kind of force opportunity attacks, and there's only a very few ways you can actually do that, you're just not going to be making them that often. So this gives you a use for your reaction, which is good. Action economy wise, if you can use your reaction, that means you are giving your team an advantage. You get effectively free movement, which is nice. Another thing that's really, really nice is if you did do this, this means that the creature gets knocked prone, meaning you can do this and then do a bunch more attacks to it, and you can actually keep moving it while it's prone. But that also means that second part, when you push a creature into a space within 5 feet of one of your allies, they get an opportunity attack. So you could hit them, push them, knock them prone. Your ally standing right next to them gets advantage for their opportunity attack, and then you can push it again. This means that positioning your enemies using that Thunderous Blows to really move enemies where you want them to is really, really important, because now you can literally transmute movement into extra damage. And if you know your team really well, you will know which ones are going to give you the best bang for your buck. Something like giving a paladin an opportunity attack is generally going to be a little bit more useful than giving maybe a regular old fighter an opportunity attack, because paladins can smite, and if they get a crit, which is more likely if the creature is knocked prone, their smites do double the damage. In addition, giving a rogue an opportunity attack. Rogues can only use their sneak attack once per turn, not per round. So if they can get an attack when it's not their turn, i.e. using a reaction to make an opportunity attack, they can get a second sneak attack in per round by using their reaction. Really, really useful. Another thing that a lot of people don't think about is people with or spellcasters specifically with the war, I believe it's a war mage feat. Effectively, it means that they can cast a spell when they make an opportunity attack instead of making a weapon attack. So giving a spellcaster the chance to cast even just cantrips can be really, really effective, because cantrips level up as you level up. So even just a single green flame blade at 11th level is going to do your weapon attack damage plus 2d8 fire damage from a single attack, and that's pretty good. I'm looking up the feat right now because I've completely forgotten how the darn thing works. Warcaster, there we go, that's what it's called. Yeah, and so you can cast a spell at the creature. The spell must have a casting time of 1 action and must target only that creature. So there's a limitation on it, but you can cast any leveled spell you want. So Disintegrate could be useful, especially if that caster also happens to have the crossbow expertise feat, which means they don't roll disadvantage when they make ranged attacks with creatures within 5 feet. Or something like Vampiric Touch, which I think is a bonus action, so ignore that. But there's a lot of spells that you can do that are touch based or aren't going to give you issues if you cast it on someone within 5 feet, and Hurricane Strike is really going to help out. But it does mean you need to understand your team really well, and you need them to understand you as well. Understand that if they get somewhat close to you, there's a chance that they can make opportunity attacks. It's going to change how your entire team plays based around the fact that you can grant them opportunity attacks. So remember that. One of the things we used to say in 4th edition was the most overpowered thing in 4th edition was to teamwork, because everybody had cool abilities in 4th edition, but when you started mixing abilities from different classes, that's when things started to become super stupid kind of overpowered. And the only way you could do that, because generally you couldn't do that with multi-classing or hybrid classing or anything like that, you generally had to have 2 different players working together. But when they did that, you could take down just about anything, but you had to understand how your team worked. And I like seeing that show up in 5th edition, because as much as in 4th edition it did become quote-unquote broken, it was a really satisfying thing to have quote-unquote broken, because it really incentivized people to be watching combat even when it wasn't their turn, to really be invested in the other characters as well. Like, it was fun. Finally, at 14th level, you get Unstoppable. Which is, again, I think very, very similar to what was in the book. Effectively, when you're raging, your speed cannot be reduced. You're immune to the frightened, paralyzed, prone, and stunned conditions. And if you're frightened, paralyzed, stunned, or stunned, you can still use your bonus action to enter a rage, and you aren't affected by any of these conditions while you're raging. So, this is really, really useful. Prone doesn't really matter, because you already have Spirit of the Mountain. While you're raging, you can't be knocked prone. The difference being, for Spirit of the Mountain, you can't be knocked prone. Unstoppable, you are immune to the prone condition. Meaning, even if you are quote-unquote prone, the condition effect of it doesn't matter. So even if you are quote-unquote prone, your attacks don't have disadvantage, and attacks against you don't have advantage. It means that even if you were knocked prone before you started raging, anything that would happen because of the prone condition doesn't happen to you. Because you are immune to that condition, and while you are raging. If you're already raging, you can't be knocked prone anyway. However, frightened, there are a lot of different things that give you immunity to the frightened condition, and by 14th level, you probably have a couple different versions of things that make you immune, or at least resistance to being frightened. So that one's not that big a deal. The frightened condition is not great. It gives you disadvantage on all its attack rolls, as long as the thing you're afraid of you can see. But there's so many other ways to get it that's not a big thing. However, paralyzed and stunned are bad, especially for a barbarian. Again, we mentioned before, rage ends if you go a complete turn without making an attack or getting attacked, or taking damage, I mean. So, a real quick way to handicap a barbarian is to stun them or paralyze them and then ignore them for a turn. Because that makes their rage end. And they have a limited number of rages. Now, by the time you have gotten to 14th level, you have 5 rages per day. So this happening in one combat and then being able to get rid of all your rages in a single combat is not going to happen. But if you are going through, like maybe you're going through a dungeon or something like that, it would not be, especially by 14th level, it would not be out of the ordinary for the people in this dungeon to be aware that your adventuring party exists and that it has a barbarian. And the easiest way to deal with a barbarian is to stun or paralyze them for it to turn and then ignore them. And so while you're doing this kind of classic dungeon dive, if every combat you have to use 2 or 3 rages, well, by your 3rd combat, you are out of rages. So The ability to be immune to the paralyzed condition and the stun conditions is massive. Not to mention that when you're paralyzed, any melee attacks made within 5 feet are auto crits if they hit. Yeah, it's really, really, really useful to be immune to those things. And it means that this barbarian can just really rush into the middle of danger, no matter what it is, and not have to worry too much that they're going to get bitten in the ass by that decision. Other flavors of barbarians, sometimes they can play very impulsively and then run into issues when they get there and they're like, oh crap, maybe I shouldn't have done that this time. This one again is really unstoppable. So, final thoughts. Overall, this is definitely an upgrade to the Path of the Juggernaut Barbarian from the original version. There's a lot more here that works, and that was one of my critiques of the original book, is when Critical Role publishes, like the original one was published through Green Ronin, and this one is published through Directing Press. One of the quote-unquote issues that I have when people publish like this and they publish physical copies is updates tend to not happen. I have created my own custom class on the DM's Guild. It's a platinum bestseller called the Dragon Knight. It is in its 6th change from when it was published 4 years ago. Matt Mercer's Blood Hunter class, when it was published there, it went through 8 revisions and then got published and has had some revisions since it got published officially and is on D&D Beyond. There's only so many things you can learn from playtesting. You really have to be able to modify things based on people actually playing the class. And it kind of shows in what happened with the Path of the Juggernaut. The original abilities weren't super powerful. The class wasn't bad in any way, shape, or form, but it also wasn't great. This one is really good. It plays very uniquely. It's very, very different from any other barbarian subclass you're going to play, which I like. I want to see your subclass should make you feel different. If you've got 2 barbarians in a party and each one picks a different subclass, they should feel that they have similarities, but they are different characters, and they should feel that there are different situations in which they get to shine and the other barbarian doesn't. And this does that really, really well. Overall, I really like it. I think it's really, really fun. I don't really see anything in here that is broken or could be abused or anything. Sometimes you do see that, and I'll go, yeah, by the way, we need to change this or else it's going to be super broken. This is a really well-balanced subclass. It understands the barbarian really well, which is another thing that can cause problems if you just don't understand the class that you're modifying. And yeah, it looks fun. That is the most important thing in any RPG supplement you're ever going to find, is does it look fun to play? And this definitely does. I could have a lot of fun playing this, and I hope you guys could too. Otherwise, that is going to be all for me today. As always, again, like, subscribe, turn notifications as is on in the comments down below. What do you think would be the most fun thing you could do with a combination of Hurricane Strike and Thunderous Blows? Just come up with the weirdest, most broken combination, create any kind of terrain you want, combine it with thorns on the ground or whatever. Come up with something really weird. Let me know the kind of cool things you would want to do in the comments down below with your Juggernaut. Otherwise, again, that's all for me today, and I'll see you guys next time, alright? Bye-bye.